In Zaragoza, King al-Muqtadir built the Aljaferia, a palace that even today looks like a dream made of marble and plaster. In Granada, the Zurids began building the enclosure of the Alhambra on Sabika Hill. In Almeria, the richest port in the Mediterranean, ships arrived from Alexandria, Constantinople, and Sicily, loaded with spices, slaves, and books. In Valencia, the Vizier Ibn Jahaf ruled in the name of a mad king locked in a tower, and everywhere there was poetry. Poets who were generals, viziers, beggars, or kings. Poets who fell in love with boys or princesses, who insulted one another in verses that are studied today in universities. Ibn Zaydan wrote to Walada, the Umayyad princess who kept a literary salon open to all and who embroidered verses on her tunic. I am worthy of glory from God, and I walk toward it with firm steps. They loved one another, betrayed one another, tore each other apart in poems that still bring tears to the eyes. But beneath the beauty, rot was spreading. The Taifa kings paid the Christians more gold every year so they would not attack. Alfonso VI of Leon and Castile, a harsh and perceptive man, called them my Moorish kings and collected tribute from them, which allowed him to build the Cathedral of Santiago and marry his daughters to the kings of France and England. In 1085, Alfonso VI decided that he had waited long enough. He besieged Toledo. Toledo was the ancient capital of the Visigoths, the sacred city of the Christians. King al-Qadir, terrified, begged for help from the other Muslim kings. No one came. Seville, Zaragoza, Granada, Badajoz all looked the other way. On May 25, 1085, Toledo opened its gates. Alfonso VI rode in on a white horse and sat upon the throne of the Visigothic kings. That was the day Al-Andalus realized it was naked. Islamic scholars cried out in the mosques, "This is Allah's punishment for our sins and our divisions." Poets wept in their palaces, and Al-Mu'tamid, king of Seville, wrote one of the saddest verses in Arabic literature. Woe to me! I have placed my neck under the yoke of the unbelievers. Out of fear of death, I exchanged glory for humiliation. At that moment, a group of Islamic scholars and notable men crossed the strait and entered Morocco. They went in search of the Almoravids, desert warriors who wore the black litham and claimed to be the pure sword of Islam. Yusuf ibn Tashfin, emir of the Almoravids, heard their pleas and replied, I will go to save Al-Andalus, but when I arrive I will not leave. The paradise of poets has become the hell of Puritans. October 1086, the plain of Sagrajas near Badajoz. The sun had barely risen, and already more than 30,000 men faced one another. On one side stood Alfonso VI with his heavy cavalry, red crosses on their shields, bishops blessing their spears. On the other side stood a sea of black veils and war drums that echoed like distant thunder, the Almoravids. Yusuf ibn Tashfin, a 67-year-old man, thin, dark-skinned, with a white beard and eyes like burning embers, sat on the ground on a prayer mat. He wore neither crown nor silk, only a simple black turban and a coarse woolen tunic. When asked why he did not ride a horse like the other rulers, he replied, The Prophet rode a camel, I need no more. The battle began at noon on a Friday. After the communal prayer, the Almoravids attacked in waves. First came the camel-mounted archers, then the Senegalese spearmen, naked from the waist up, finally, the heavy cavalry with faces covered by the litham. Alfonso VI lost half his army in 6 hours. He himself fled, his face covered in blood, leaving behind 5,000 dead, among them many Castilian nobles. When he reached Toledo, he claimed he had heard the Almoravids shout Allahu Akbar so many times that he thought the sky would collapse. It was the greatest Christian defeat since the Battle of Guadalete 375 years earlier. Al-Andalus breathed again. The Taifa kings sent gifts to Yusuf, gold, slaves, and Arabian horses. Al-Mu'tamid of Seville even gave him his own sword with an ivory hilt. Yusuf took it, examined it, and said, Keep it. Soon you will need it to defend yourself from me. Because Yusuf had not come to save the poet kings, he had come to punish them. In 1090, 4 years after Sagrajes, Yusuf returned with an even larger army. One by one, the Taifas fell like ripe fruit. Granada in September 1090, Córdoba in March 1091. The Almoravids entered the Great Mosque and burned every book of philosophy and poetry they could find. Seville fell in September 1091. Al-Mu'tamid fought until the very last day. When he saw that everything was lost, he went out into the courtyard of his palace with his wife Itimad and their children, and said, "I would rather be a camel driver in Morocco than a swineherd in Castile." The Almoravids chained him and put him on a ship bound for Africa. On the galley, Itimed looked one last time at the silhouette of Seville and wept. Al-Mutamid carved verses into the wood of the ship with his fingernail. "O Seville, how long I ruled within you, and now I walk in chains." He died 4 years later in a village near Agmut, a prisoner poor and blinded by tears. His verses are still recited today. Valencia held out longer. There Rodrigo Diaz de Vivar el Cid Campeador ruled as an independent lord from 1094. After his death in 1099, his widow Jimena took over the defense of the city, supported by a Castilian garrison. The Almoravids kept up the pressure for years and finally captured Valencia in 1102. Legends claim that El Cid was made to ride Babica to inspire terror, but in reality, although his body had been embalmed, it was never used in battle. Before the fall, Jimena evacuated the city and took her husband's remains with her to the monastery of San Pedro de Cardena. In less than 10 years, all the taifas disappeared. Al-Andalus once again became a unified state, but it was no longer a land of perfumed poets. It had become a military empire of the desert. The Almoravids forbade wine, music, and dancing in public places. They burned the books of Al-Ghazali, claiming he spoke too much about love. They forced women to wear full veils. Jews and Christians, who had previously been protected, were now subjected to heavier taxes. The Andalusians, who felt culturally superior to the Africans, mocked them in private, calling them the stinking ones and camel drivers. Yusuf ibn Tashfin died after living nearly 100 years, having spent much of his life in prayer. His sons and grandsons succeeded him, but the empire began to fracture almost immediately. In the north, the Christians recovered their strength. Alfonso I, the Battler of Aragon, captured Zaragoza in 1118. After a brutal siege, the Almoravids began to lose battle after battle. In 1144, a popular uprising in Córdoba itself proclaimed a new leader, Ibn Mardaniz, the Wolf King of Murcia, allied with the Christians. And in the Atlas Mountains, another, even more fanatical movement was watching and waiting. The Almohads, who proclaimed the absolute unity of God, led by a man who claimed to have seen the prophet in a dream. The Almoravids, who had come to save Al-Andalus, had become hated tyrants. In 1145, the last Almoravid governor of Córdoba was killed inside the mosque while praying. His head rolled down the steps of the mihrab. The desert had devoured the gardens, but the desert itself was about to be devoured by an even harsher desert. Al-Andalus was once again preparing to shed its skin. Marrakesh, 1130. A thin man with sunken eyes and a voice like distant thunder stood before the crowd gathered in front of the Kutubiyya Mosque. His name was Muhammad ibn Tumart. He wore a seamless white robe, his hair and beard reaching his chest. He raised his hand and cried out, "There is no God but God, and he has no equal." The Almoravids, he declared, had corrupted the faith. On that day was born the Almohad movement, those who proclaimed the unity, those who believed the world was rotten and that only fire could purify it. Ibn Tumart proclaimed himself the infallible guide. When asked why he allowed himself what he forbade to others, he replied, "The Mahdi is the living proof of God on earth. What he does is law." Within 12 years, the Almohads conquered the entire Maghreb. In 1147, they captured Marrakesh. The Almoravids were slaughtered without mercy. Their women were enslaved. Books of poetry, music, and philosophy were thrown onto bonfires that burned for days. The new ruler, Abd al-Mumin, was crowned Caliph of the Faithful. In 1148, he crossed the strait with an army described by chroniclers as a black cloud blotting out the sun. Al-Andalus received the Almohads with a mixture of fear and hope. The Andalusians hated the Almoravids, but they soon discovered that the new masters were worse. One by one, cities either opened their gates or were taken by force. Malaga fell in 1151, Granada in 1154, Córdoba in 1163. The Almohads entered the Great Mosque and ordered that all verses of love written on its walls be erased. Seville fell in 1172. In every square, Almohad scholars proclaimed, "Enough of flutes, wine, and perfumed boys, return to the Quran or die." Jews and Christians who refused conversion were expelled or killed. Thousands fled to the Kingdom of Castile, among them the family of Moses ben Maimon, who would later settle in Egypt and whose son would become known as Maimonides. Andalusians who resisted were punished in ways reminiscent of the darkest Roman times. In Córdoba, a group of young men were caught singing an old muwasha by Ibn Zaydan. The Almohads crucified them upside down at the gate of the bridge. For weeks, crows feasted on their eyes. Yet in war against the Christians, the Almohads were invincible for a time. In 1195, Caliph Abu Yusuf Yaqub al-Mansur crossed the strait with an army that, according to the chronicler al-Marrakushi, made the earth tremble. On July 19th, on the plain of Alarcos near Ciudad Real, he faced Alfonso VIII of Castile. The battle was a massacre. The Christians lost 15,000 men. Alfonso fled with only 300 horsemen. Al-Mansur ordered the heads of Castilian nobles to be nailed to the walls of Seville and took the title Al-Mansur, the victorious, the same title borne by the great conqueror 2 centuries earlier. For 15 years the Almohads seemed unstoppable. They retook Valencia, conquered the Algarve, and forced Christian kings once again to pay tribute. In Seville, they built the Giralda, a tower so tall it was said that Africa could be seen from its summit. In Marrakesh they raised the Kutubia. In Rabat they began building a mosque that would have been the largest in the world had it ever been finished. But pride kills. Caliph al-Nasir was a weak man, surrounded by corrupt viziers. While he indulged in concubines, the Christian kingdoms united for the first time in a crusade proclaimed by Pope Innocent III. On July 16, 1212, at the Battle of Las Navas de Tolosa, 2 worlds collided. On one side stood Alfonso VIII of Castile, Pedro II of Aragon, and Sancho VII of Navarre, with 40,000 men and papal blessing. On the other side stood Caliph al-Nasir with more than 100,000 men, according to exaggerated chronicles, all crying Allahu Akbar. The battle raged all day under hellish heat. Around the caliph's tent the Almohads formed a human chain. Men tied to one another with ropes so they could not retreat. When Christian cavalry broke the chain, it became a death trap. Tens of thousands died trampled by their own companions. The caliph fled, leaving behind his personal Quran, adorned with gold and pearls, which is still preserved today in El Escorial. He returned to Seville broken in spirit. It is said he never smiled again. He died a year later, drowned in his own bile, according to physicians. After Las Navas, everything collapsed. In 1223, Murcia surrendered to the Christians. In 1236, Córdoba, capital of the Caliphate for 300 years, opened its gates to Ferdinand III of Castile. The remaining Almohads were slaughtered or fled. The great mosque was turned into a cathedral. The bells once carried south by Al-Mansur returned north, borne on the shoulders of Muslim prisoners. In 1248, Seville fell. The last Almohad caliph on the peninsula, Abu Umar al-Murtada, sailed for Marrakesh with what remained of the treasury. As the galley left the harbor, an old woman on the shore cried out, "The last lion of Islam in Al-Andalus is leaving." In less than 70 years, the Almohads had arrived like a storm and departed like dust on the wind. Behind them they left ruins, burned books, and a phrase the Andalusians would repeat for centuries. First came the perfumed ones, then the hooded figures, then the fanatics, and now comes ruin. Islam had lost half the peninsula. Only the small Nasra kingdom of Granada remained, nestled among the snows of the Sierra Nevada, paying tribute and pretending it was still powerful. The end was near. Granada, 1238. A 24-year-old man with a black beard and eyes like burning embers climbs the red hill of Sabika and looks down upon the city at his feet. His name is Muhammad ibn Yusuf ibn Nasr, but people already call him Ibn al-Amar, the son of the Red One, either because of the color of his beard or because of the blood he spilled to reach this place. He had taken Granada with barely 300 horsemen after the collapse of the Almohads. The notables of the city opened the gates to him and swore loyalty. He, cunning and cautious, kissed the ground and said, "I am not a king. I am only the first among the servants of God." Thus he founded the Nasra dynasty, the last Muslim dynasty of the Iberian Peninsula. For 260 years, 23 Nasra sultans would rule a kingdom that grew smaller, more beautiful, and more doomed with every generation. The secret of their survival was simple: pay, deceive, and build beauty so no one dares destroy it. From the very first day, Muhammad I ibn al-Amar knelt before Ferdinand III of Castile and became his vassal. He surrendered John, promised 100,000 maravedis a year, and sent Muslim cavalry to fight against other Muslims. In return, the Christians allowed Granada to live. And while he paid, he built. At first, the Alhambra was not a palace, it was a fortress, but his sons and grandsons transformed it into the most beautiful stone dream ever created. Courtyards filled with myrtle trees where water sings, halls of stalactites resembling an inverted sky, verses of the Quran winding across the walls like golden ivy. In the 14th century, Yusuf I ordered the inscription on the Fountain of the Lions, "Blessed be the hand that carved these columns and these lions, for within them the glory of a kingdom that still breathes is visible." For 2 centuries, Granada lived a second golden age, smaller but more intense. Merchants from Venice and Genoa arrived at the port of Malaga loaded with fabrics and spices. Converted Jews and Moriscos cultivated silk in La Vega, the most fertile plain in Europe. Poets such as Ibn al-Jatib and Ibn Zamruk wrote verses that can still be read today on the walls of the Alhambra. Musicians played in the gardens of the Generalife, while princesses danced barefoot on Damascene carpets. But every year, the kingdom shrank. In 1482, a marriage changed history. Isabella of Castile and Ferdinand of Aragon united their crowns. There were no longer divisions between Castile and Aragon. There was no one left to oppose them. The Catholic monarchs looked toward Granada and said, "The time has come." On April 10, 1483, the Christian army crossed the frontier. 100,000 men, bronze cannons cast in Flanders, thousands of knights in shining armor. Granada had barely 50,000 inhabitants and 15,000 defenders. The war lasted 10 years, 10 years of sieges, betrayals, and hunger. Boabdil, the last sultan, was a man trapped in a storm. He was 23 when the war began and 33 when it ended. His father Muley Hassan, his uncle El Zagal, and their allies fought for the throne while the Christians advanced. Boabdil was captured at Lucena in 1483. The Catholic monarchs released him on one condition, that he fight against his own uncle. He became a puppet king of the Christians in his own realm. One by one the cities fell. Malaga in 1487, its inhabitants sold into slavery or burned alive. Baza, Almeria, Guadix, only Granada remained. On January 2, 1492, Boabdil left the Alhambra through the Gate of the Seven Floors, accompanied by his mother Aisha, his wife Moraima, and his young son. The Catholic monarchs awaited him in the plain. With trembling hands he handed over the keys of the city. Legend says that as he climbed the mountain pass now called the Moor's Last Sigh, Boabdil turned back to look at Granada one final time and burst into tears. Beside him stood his mother Aisha, the unyielding sultana, who reproached him, "Do not weep like a woman for what you could not defend like a man." The Alhambra stood empty. The fountains continued to sing, but no one listened. The Jews were expelled. Months later, the Mudéjars, as the remaining Muslims were called, were forced to convert or go into exile in 1502. Many left for North Africa. Others stayed and became Moriscos, false Christians who hid the Quran beneath the earth. On January 2, 1492, at 11 in the morning, the banner of Castile and Aragon rose atop the watchtower. A herald cried, "Granada belongs to the Catholic monarchs, Santiago enclosed Spain." 8 centuries after Tariq burned his ships on the shores of Gibraltar, the last Muslim ship left Almeria, bound for Oran. Al-Andalus was dead. But on the walls of the Alhambra, in the verses of Ibn Zamruk, in the songs still sung in the old villages of the Alpujarra, an echo remains, one that will never fade. Everything passes, only beauty remains. Granada, 1992. 500 years after the fall, a tourist climbs the hill of Sabika and stops at the Fountain of the Lions. The water still flows in silver cascades as if time itself had stopped. A guide explains that here ruled Boabdil, the last Moorish king. But the true legacy of Al-Andalus is not in ruins, it is everywhere. 8 centuries of Islam on the peninsula cannot be erased by decree. When Boabdil handed over the keys, he did not end history, he buried it beneath the earth. In the Spanish language alone, modern Arabic survives in more than 4,000 words: mayor, oil, cotton, sugar, chess, hope, God willing. Every time we say olive or chance, we invoke the gardens of Córdoba. In architecture, the Alhambra is not an exception. It lives in the arches of the Great Mosque of Córdoba, in the courtyards of Andalusia's white villages, in the Mudéjar towers of Teruel, even in the Alcazar of Seville, turned into a Christian palace but still scented with musk and jasmine. In science, Andalusian physicians pioneered modern surgery. Astronomers in Toledo measured the heavens with instruments Copernicus would use centuries later. The philosophy of Averroes and Avicenna shaped Thomas Aquinas and the Renaissance itself. But the deepest legacy is human. The Moriscos, forced Christians who hid the Quran in basements and prayed in Arabic disguised as Latin, rose in rebellion in the Alpujarra in 1568. When they were expelled in 1609, 200,000 left for Tunis and Algeria. Others vanished into silence. Even today, in villages of the Alpujarra, families still bury amulets bearing Quranic verses. They dance the Zambra in secret. Al-Andalus was not only conquest and glory, it was the greatest experiment in coexistence. Muslims, Christians, and Jews lived together. They hated each other, they loved each other, they created together. In Córdoba, a Muslim scholar debated with a bishop while a rabbi wrote medical treatises. That broken miracle, shattered by intolerance, is what hurts the most. Today, when we look at the Strait of Gibraltar, we see more than water. We see the bridge Al-Andalus built between East and West. Palaces collapsed, books burned, kings wept, but its soul remains in April light, in the sound of fountains, in a nostalgia we feel without knowing why. 8 centuries later, Al-Andalus is not gone. It only sleeps, and on nights of the full moon above the Alhambra, one can still hear the echo of a distant lute.